Welcome to the Strategic Thinkers Podcast, where we navigate the real path to business success, your path. Each episode brings you actionable strategies and real stories from entrepreneurs who are building their business their way. My name is Sean Atkinson, and I'm your guide through the process of making the inconvenient convenient. Because when you can make the inconvenient convenient, people are willing to pay you for it. The more convenient you can make it, the better the experience. And that's where you make real progress. P.A.U.S.E is about evaluating not just from a business standpoint, but from the customers, and then looking at the surrounding circumstances. I want you to be empowered to be able to read the room, because when you can read the room, you'll have better conversations. When you have better conversations, you get better questions. When you get better questions, you learn how to give better answers. And the more answers that you know how to be able to answer, the more confident the audience is. And it takes them from how much is this going to cost me to how do I get in on this? This sounds like a great opportunity. Welcome to the Strategic Thinkers Podcast, episode 3. This episode, we're looking at the P.A.U.S.E framework. And P.A.U.S.E is really about doing your due diligence. P.A.U.S.E isn't about stopping or hesitating. It's about being intentional and purposeful in your approach to partnering with an audience. It's about measuring twice and cutting once. Let's break down what P.A.U.S.E stands for. P.A.U.S.E is potential assessment, assessing your timing, understanding your market, strengthening your foundation, and then executing when ready. So let's unpack this a bit more. So when we talk about potential assessment, is this something that I would buy from someone else? Is this something that there's a demand for? Is it something that is a demand now, but it may not be in 6 months? If it's something that's trending now, but the market is going in a different direction, is it really something that you want to be able to launch? Is it going to be worth the effort of putting it out there, knowing that you're going to end up needing to create something else or roll something else out? Yes, you can get that quick win, but how much effort do you have to put in to getting that quick win? Assessing your timing. Again, is this something that if you roll out now, you're going to be able to maximize the business opportunity? If it's something that would be better served 6 months from now, a year from now, during a different season, then why not find a way to be able to set it up for success by gathering information, by pausing, and making sure that you get the information that you need so that when you do roll it out, you can maximize that opportunity. Sometimes you can go for those quick wins, but you're setting up the quick wins in a way that allows you to be able to work on the long-term success that you're looking for. Yes, I'll get the quick wins. I'll launch, I'll roll out a product or a service that I know is going to be popular enough that it will get me that one-time purchase. But what I'm really setting up is establishing the trust necessary to be able to pitch and sell that long-term service that requires someone trust me enough that they trust and believe in my ability to deliver on the results that I say that I'm delivering on. P.A.U.S.E is about doing your due diligence. It's about making sure that you're looking at it not just from the business standpoint, but from the consumer standpoint, and then the surrounding circumstances. When you can take those 3 factors into consideration, it allows you to be able to generate messaging and a real relationship with the actual audience, giving them something and you're getting something. There's a quid pro quo involved with P.A.U.S.E. I'll give you an example. Let's look at it from an early stage business. I had an ex-coworker whose husband is a chef, and he was going to start a restaurant. And what he wanted to be able to do was he felt pretty confident about his menu, but what his wife wanted him to do was understand the full experience of the restaurant. So it wasn't just about whether or not the food was good. It was going to be about the experience, the ambiance, the whole setting themselves up to be able to have a story that can be told in rooms they're not in. So I'll give you an example. The hostess had their own job. The waiter and the waitress had their own job. And then there was the chef, and he had his job of making sure that the meals were right. I'll break it down for you a bit more. The host or the hostess, when you walk in, would ask how your day was going. Why is that important? Well, if you were having a really bad day and you were coming out to this menu tasting and you want to leave the day behind you, that was going to be relevant information, because what they were trying to do is leave a bad day behind them and start anew, looking to create a new experience. If it was someone that was having a great day, then what you're really trying to do is you're trying to continue something that's already going well. You don't need to change the whole energy. You don't need to change the vibe. Everything is already going in the direction that it needs to go in. If it's a date and this is early stage where you're still getting to know each other and it's still something where you worry about some of the awkward pauses, but you have to work through those to be able to get to the point where you realize, I'm learning about this person in ways that I never thought that I would, but I have to put myself in circumstances where I can learn those things. And that is its own separate way of the host knowing where to be able to sit someone. If it's a couple that's been around each other for a longer time and they're more established, maybe you want to sit them someplace where there's more of a view, more other things to be able to talk about. Because let's be honest, when you're in a relationship with someone and you talk to that person all the time, sometimes the surrounding circumstances give you new things to talk about, as opposed to that early stage dating couple where they need to focus more on each other. So you might sit them in a section where it's a little more quiet, where they can talk and they can hear each other and they don't have as many distractions. Then there was the group of friends that were invited, and it was just a larger group. Nobody in a couple, just friends to hang out. And they were people that were coming in, mixed crowd. They were going to be seated someplace where it was going to allow them to be as boisterous as they wanted to be. If it was something where they were going to be louder, they weren't going to interrupt the early stage couple, and they weren't going to interrupt the latter stage couple where they're already in a relationship. It was going to make it so that they had access to more room and space. It was something that they clearly thought through. I want to set the tone of the experience. I want to gather the expectations, and then I want to either continue them, change them, or reframe them. So the hostess had a very clear job, and their job was to identify what the situation was from the moment that person came in, and then set the tone and set the narrative for the rest of the evening. So that person would ask the question, how's your day going? Was it easy to be able to find a restaurant? Were you able to find parking? These are questions that may seem simple enough, but they tell a lot, because it gave people enough information to be able to say, from the moment I came in, they cared about me and my experience. They let me know that they cared about what happened before I walked through the door. That let that person know, okay, so this is going to be a different type of situation. It also gave that host and hostess enough information to be able to relate to the waiter or the waitress. That way, when the waiter or the waitress came over, they knew what to expect. They kind of knew what the situation was going to be, and it allowed them to continue what the experience was meant to be. So if it was someone that was having a rough day, one of the first things they came over with was, hey, how are you? Do you need a drink? Can I get you anything? I want to get things started off on the best note possible for you. Sounded like you were having a rough day, and I just want to make sure that we can change that experience for you right now. So what can I do for you to make your day better? Who doesn't want that kind of experience when you're having a bad day and you're trying to leave everything else behind you? By the host asking those questions and relaying that over to the waiter and the waitress, that allowed them to be able to continue the experience in the tone that they were setting, so that they can make sure that the narrative was going to be, from the moment I got here, it was nothing but a great experience. For the person that was having a great day, hey, I hear things are going pretty well for you. I want to make sure that I can continue that for you. What can I do to make sure that we keep that great day a great day? What can I do to make it a great night? Well, that's where you get a response from the person. They're more willing to share information because you're showing them that you're not just in your world, you're actually interested in their world and how to be able to make sure that you're giving them the experience and meeting the expectations that they have. Fast forward, we're going to look at the menu. We're doing a menu tasting, but we really want you to be able to think about this as you would any other restaurant that you went into. So I'm going to give you the menu and I'm going to check and see a few different things. Are you hungry? Did you eat before you got here? In some cases, you might want to eat before you go to a restaurant that you've never been to before, because one, you don't know what the food's going to be like. And if the food isn't what you thought it was going to be, or if it isn't desirable, then you don't want to sit there hungry and wolfing down food that you don't really like just to be eating it. So in some cases, someone might have had, a little something to nosh on before they got there. That's going to be good to know, because when you start to do those recommendations, it's going to let you know that person might need a little bit more time for their food to digest and for them to be hungry again. So you might make a recommendation for something that takes longer to prepare. If the person says that they're hungry, then that's a different consideration. Okay, well then, do you want us to be able to bring out some appetizers, something that's not necessarily going to fill you up, but something to take the edge off? So then this way, when you're ordering, you can order on your main meal based on what you're going to want then, and not just on the fact that you're hungry right now. Again, what's not to love about that experience? That's letting someone know that you were thoughtful, you were intentional, you were purposeful in the questions that you were asking. The questions actually mattered to that person, and they could see where the benefit of answering that question in a way that actually gave the person the information that they needed, made them have a better experience. Let's look at the early stage couple. Here, this is like your second or third date. What I want to be able to do is I want to be able to give you the menu, give you all the information that you need, and I will stay off to the side. I want to give you guys a chance to be able to talk. I can give you the space. I don't want to come in and interrupt conversations when you might be getting to a point where you're finding out some good details that you might not have known. So what we want to be able to do is we want to be able to give you your space. I'm going to give you all the information that you need. And then if you ever need me, all you have to do is just wave and I'll be off to the side where I can come over and make sure that you're being taken care of. The longer standing couple, they probably already know what the other person likes, what to expect. So if the person gets up and they say, well, I see they're not here, do you want me to come back? Oh no, he's going to want this drink and he's probably going to want this type of appetizer. Okay. So you can start to see where asking follow-up questions that are engaging, but actually informative, gives you enough information so that you can start to read the room. And when I talk about reading the room, these are ways to be able to read the room. You're not just looking at a person and trying to say, well, I think they're this and I think they're that. You're asking qualifying questions that allow that person to tell you where they're at. It's giving you an idea of the surrounding circumstances so that you can see how to be able to carry yourself going forward. So fast forward again. Now the people have had a chance to be able to look at the menu. They may look at the menu and say, okay, well, some people are going to say, I know what I want. Some people aren't going to be sure about what they want, and they're going to ask for recommendations. Now here's where all those qualifying questions and all the things that you asked leading up to it are going to be helpful. Again, let's go back to it. If someone's hungry, you want to be able to make recommendations that allow them to be able to take care of that initial need, but you also want to leave room for that person to be able to enjoy an experience later. How many times have you been out with someone and they've ordered some food because they were hungry and their food came first and everybody else's food came later, and then they sat there watching everybody else eat? It's awkward, it's uncomfortable, and it's unnecessary. Why not be able to set that person up to say, okay, knowing that you're hungry, let me set you up with some appetizers that will take the edge off, and then we'll get you set up for that main course so that you can still enjoy your meal while everybody else is enjoying their meal, but you're not doing it from a pace of being famished. That is something where you create a great experience for that person. If it's something where you know that person did eat or they're not that hungry, then when you're making your recommendation, you can make a recommendation on something that takes longer to prepare. Those are going to be things that are, or at least should be, factored into how you deal with someone, how you work through setting up a scenario, setting up surrounding circumstances that allow a person to be able to have a great user experience. A lot of what you'll hear me talk about is about having a great customer experience, because when you can have that great customer experience, then you're creating opportunities for that person to want to come back. Okay. So we talked about an early stage business and how they set that situation up so that they could gather information, so that they could start to learn about some of the frequently asked questions. When they asked about recommendations, they didn't just start mouthing off things that were on the menu. They started asking qualifying questions. Well, is there anything that you don't eat? Do you like spicy food? Do you want something that's sweet and savory? Is it something that you have in mind? Is there anything on the menu that you have questions about? Those follow-up questions are things that allow that person to be able to make a much better recommendation. By the time they go to give that recommendation, they know enough about the person to be able to read that situation and narrow the scope of the offerings and the options. But without that, you can very likely make a recommendation that is totally out of left field, and that person is from that point on not going to trust your recommendations the same way. So I always find it fascinating. I go to a restaurant and someone asks for recommendations and someone doesn't ask any of those qualifying questions. Basically, what they're doing is they're giving you a recommendation based on what they like. And if that person isn't like-minded like you, then you could, instead of getting what you want, you can end up getting what you get. So I think it's really important to understand this analogy that I'm giving you with the restaurant and applying it to your business. It's pause because you're taking time to not just jump into making the recommendation. You're taking the time to gather information so that when you make a recommendation, you're making a recommendation based on information that they gave you. And then you're taking that information and giving it back to them in a way and saying, here's what I heard. Did I hear that right? Because if you heard it wrong, then that person will most likely correct you, but it won't be from a standpoint of you weren't listening or you were guessing. It was coming from a standpoint of, let me elaborate. And again, that gets you to a deeper level of questions and understanding so that you ensure that that person is going to have the experience that you want them to be able to have. Okay, so now let's look at it from a seasoned business standpoint. A seasoned business, this can be something where it's not necessarily launching a new product or a service. It's something that already exists and you've got your best sellers, and then you're trying to figure out how to be able to grow and scale. So in some cases, you may have your best seller, but your best seller might not be your most profitable product or service. Let me explain. Best sellers sometimes can be quick wins. Best sellers can be, I know I can sell this in my sleep. But it could be something where someone buys it, but it's a low cost or mid cost item that someone may buy once and they may not need to buy it again. The quick wins should be things that serve as introductions to larger services. I find it fascinating. Sometimes people will do the high ticket sale, or they'll do something where it's selling a larger product or service, and then they have the add-ons. And the add-ons are things that extend what it is, but it also, in some cases, is a lesser thing. So there's not a build up. There's a moving forward, and then there's just a side thing that's added on that, in some cases, it's a feature that may or may not be needed. Whereas if you use the opportunity and you're intentional and purposeful, sometimes you can set someone up with a quick win, something that's going to take care of that restaurant example. Someone is hungry. Let me find you an appetizer that's going to allow you to be able to take the edge off so that you can think clearly. And then once we've done that, then I can come back and I can ask you that question again, and I'll get a much different answer. So as a seasoned business, you may want to be able to launch something where you have that quick win. You have that bestseller. You have the thing that allows you to be able to buy time, buy trust, and buy reliability so that when you go to do that upsell, notice the difference, upsell. You can do the upsell and they're willing to hear you out. They're willing to hear, okay, well, I did this quick win and I got great results from it. Now you're telling me that the investment is going to be larger for something else. But based on the trust that we've already established with this quick win, now I feel more comfortable investing more, taking more of a risk because it feels less of a risk. So looking at how to be able to start a product or launching a product or service, or when you're evaluating something that's already existing, that's where we go back to, again, pausing. It's looking at, am I giving you the right messaging? Am I relaying this in a way that resonates with you? Sometimes you can have a product or a service that people have one understanding of because when you initially launched, you thought your business was going to be this way. You thought the audience was this. And then as you started to go through your business, you started to learn more about that audience. You started to learn more about your business. So let's go back to, when I say pause is evaluating not just from a business standpoint, but it's evaluating from a customer standpoint and then the surrounding circumstances. So we just brought it back full circle. We talked about it with the restaurant and the early stage business. Now let's go deeper into a seasoned business. A seasoned business may have that they may have that quick seller. They may have that best-selling product. But what they really need to focus on is how to take that best-selling product, use that as a segue into that more profitable service. That profitable service may be something that requires more onboarding. It may require more work. Once people know that the time investment that they make is going to get them the results that they're looking for, and they've already experienced some of those results, that hungry person that had an appetizer that now can turn around and look at the menu with a fresh set of eyes is going to look at that menu and order something that better fits where they're going to be, not just where they are in the moment. So pause is about looking beyond just the moment and living in the moment. It's also looking at the future and being intentional about where you want that to go, where you want that story to be able to go. When we're talking about pre-existing services, we're looking at, is this something that I can sell this way now? In 6 months, are you going to look at it the same way? In a year, are you going to look at it the same way? Is it something that if I sold it to you now, based on where you are in your business, it's not going to be something that would resonate with you? Think about the times where you may have a conversation with someone and they want to sell you on, I'll give you a better example. Let's think of car sales and someone that is trying to sell someone a car. You're not going to sell someone an expensive, high luxury car and it's their first car. You may, but chances are that person, if they have any good sense, they're probably going to start with a starter car, because there's a lot of things that you have to be able to figure out and learn. I know when I first got my car, I got a beater. I got an original older car that I could drive so that I learned how to be able to gauge the road. I could have some dings and vents and up on the car and not necessarily feel like I did damage to something that was going to cost me a lot of money to fix. And then once I got down driving to the point where I felt very comfortable driving, then I started to up my game and go for better cars or more expensive cars. You want to be able to crawl, walk, run with something that's going to cost more, but it also is going to give them more of a result. It's going to be more rewarding. It's going to be something where it may require more work, but there's a justification for it when you can deliver on the back end of it. So yes, have those quick wins, but when you're evaluating your product suite, look at what those quick wins are. Look at what those best sellers are. Is that something that's allowing your business to stay afloat? Is it something that you're going to be able to scale? Is it something that's going to be able to stand the test of time? If it isn't, then while you're using that best seller, create something that allows you to be able to scale. Create something that allows you to be able to evolve. Pause and think about not just what's going on in the moment, but what's going to be coming up in the future. Allow yourself to be in a position where you're able to evolve, where you're able to pivot, where you're able to make advancements. Now, we talked about thinking about what to roll out. We've talked about the experience with it. Let me give you another analogy as far as having an existing product and thinking of the timing. We talked about potential assessment. Let's look at assessing your timing. Let's use the record label as an example. I like to use the record labels because it's a nice to have. You'll continue to hear me talk about understanding your market and how they prioritize something. Is it a want? Is it a need? Is it a nice to have? Is it a guilty pleasure? When you can understand how someone prioritizes something, it helps you to figure out how to assess the timing of it. If it's something that's a want, but you know that eventually it'll turn into a need, do you want to sell the want, or do you want to sell it when they actually need it? If you're selling something to someone when it's like, I could, but I don't have to, versus, oh, this is great time, I actually need this, then you're taking into consideration the sales process. You're setting yourself up from something to being a possible sale to a plausible sale. So it's really taking a look at timing and making sure that the better you understand your audience, the better you understand the surrounding circumstances, the better you can align it with your business model and make sure that what you're presenting to them, what you're presenting it as a potential partnership with that audience, is something that allows you to be able to have longevity with it. So I'll use the record label as an example. Have you ever wondered how people come up with the idea of when to release certain songs or how they come up with the song order that they're going to release? I can tell you from the days when I was on the music label side, there was a street team. And the street team wasn't just marketing, where marketing is doing paid ads and promotions and different things like that. The street team was actually out there going to parties, going to clubs, going to events. They were taking the temperature. They were asking those follow-up questions. They were there gathering information, but then they were also distributing information. So where I say gathering information, they were looking at what songs were trending. They were looking at how people were responding to things. They were looking at when people ran to the middle of the dance floor, as opposed to, oh, this is my song, but I'm going to run to the bar, or I'm going to do this, or I'm going to do that. If there was an alternate thing that didn't give them the response that they were looking for, they took note of that, because that let them know maybe the timing wasn't right for that song. Maybe it's something that it started to lose some of its edge. So you want to get your timing right. When it came to putting out albums, if you know you had an artist and there were some songs on that album that were going to be some summer bangers, you don't put that out in fall. You don't put that out in winter. You don't put it out when it's not going to maximize the business opportunity. You may have an album and you know that you want to release the album in fall. You're going to consider a song that will build up awareness. It may get people to know who you are, but technically you're not going to roll out that summer banger until spring. Spring is going to give you enough time for people to hear it and give it enough time to take off. So by the time it gets around to the masses, there are some people where heard this song, but I couldn't think of it. Or I heard this song and I wanted to Shazam it, but I couldn't catch it fast enough to be able to find out what the song was. When you release that in spring, by the time it comes around to summertime, the people know who it is. The people have listened to it. It's starting to make the rounds. It's been around long enough so that you've maximized the opportunity of that song. If they rolled it out in fall or winter, people are indoors. So they may not hear it a lot of different places. You would have to go to a venue. You would have to hear it on the radio. There are circumstances that have to fall into place for it to take off in the way that it wouldn't necessarily do in any other circumstance. If you wait until summertime, if you wait until spring when people are out and people are like, oh my God, it's nice to get back out of the cave. I don't know how, we're not hibernating anymore. If you can start to present things in situations where people are going to be out and you want it to be something that's heard or seen, then you're going to wait and make sure that your timing's right so that you're not relying on your efforts of promoting it. You're relying on people hearing it or seeing it and then asking about it. So there's a difference between selling and being available. Selling is you almost forcing it upon someone. When you hear about auto sales and car salesmen where they're forcing things on you, it's a different situation when you have something that people already have an interest in and it's just finding out if it's available. There's the difference between saying, I'm trying to sell you on something. Go into a store and someone was, the moment you walk into the store, can I help you with something? Can I help you find something? That's a hard sell. More than not, when someone does something like that, your thing is, no, I'm good. I'm just looking, or whatever variation that you may come up with. But when you're going into a store because you want to see if something is available, when that person comes up, one of the first things that your response would be is, do you have my size? Do you have it in this color? Is the difference between selling something and there's the difference between knowing that it's available. There's a difference between the expense mindset of how much is this going to cost me versus is it available? They've already decided that they wanted it. They've already done the due diligence to say, you know what, this is something that I've decided on. I just want to find out how to make it convenient for me to be able to get it in a way that entices me to make that actual purchase or investment. Releasing a song in fall or winter that is a summer banger is you having to sell that song. Releasing it in spring and summer when there are people that will play it and then other people will hear it and start asking where that song is and how they can find that song, you just went from selling to making something available. You just went from it being an expense mindset of how much is it going to cost me to be able to promote this song so that there's enough people that know about it so that it starts to take off, versus being someone that's on a smaller budget and waiting until spring where you can basically have one of those vans driving around playing the song in areas where they know people would like the song, or where there's a street team example, where we would go to events, parties, block parties, clubs. We would go to different places and then put the song there. It was a lot easier to be able to promote it and get it to blow up when we created the right timing and we understood the market. Now, we talked about potential assessment. We talked about assessing your timing. We talked about understanding the market and understanding the wants, needs, nice to haves, and guilty pleasures. Let's talk about strengthening the foundation. Strengthening the foundation, going back to picking your timing, strengthening your foundation is making sure that you're asking the right questions so that you can have the follow-up answers. So if we're thinking about the restaurant and the host and the hostess asking how your day was, setting the expectations, gathering information so that they knew what kind of experience that person was having and whether to continue it or to change it. Strengthening your foundation is knowing what to be able to ask in those situations, knowing what information that you need so that you can put yourself on good footing so that when you do try to be able to help that person, you're moving it from it being that expense mindset of how much is this going to cost me? Everything feels like an inconvenience to it being something that's convenient and available. You're making the person feel like they're the one back in power. You're showing the person that you care about the experience that they have. And in doing so, you put yourself in a position of having a better experience, a better story being told, and a narrative that's out there in rooms that you're not in that speaks to you in a positive manner. So strengthening your foundation is really looking at how can I give someone an experience well enough that when I'm not there, they speak highly of me. How do I create a situation that I can create a connection with someone so that they feel heard, they feel seen? Again, the waiter or the waitress, is there something that you don't like? Is there something that you don't eat? Are you hungry? Asking those types of questions, those lead-in questions that gather information, allow you to strengthen your foundation of when you make a recommendation, then your recommendation actually has weight. That brings us to execute when ready. When we're talking about execute when ready, you've done your due diligence. You've checked every single one of those boxes. You know that there's a potential of this being something that can really take off. You've assessed the timing. Yes, this is something that is meant for me to launch right now. Or no, this isn't the best thing for me to launch right now. But what I can do is I can do my due diligence. I can set everything up so that when I do launch, the timing and everything will be right. And I'll get the proper type of reaction and I'll maximize my opportunity for this to be successful. Understanding your market. If you don't understand who you're selling to and what you're selling, then you put yourself in a position of not necessarily being intentional or purposeful. What you're really doing is you're winging it. You're still guessing. And when you're guessing at something that matters to someone, the more you're charging for it, the more they expect you to have figured these things out. So if you're selling a t-shirt, that's okay. You can guess at what color, what size, what kind of emblem they may want, the smaller things that may matter. But when you're talking about something that's a higher ticket item, I would say $100 or more, then people have a certain level of expectations. They want you to have done your due diligence. They want you to have answers to their frequently asked questions. They want you to be able to tell them more about what experience that they can expect after they do that investment. You have to pause, gather that information so that you can be prepared to be able to answer those questions when those questions present themselves. So again, pause is about measuring twice and cutting once. It's about being intentional and purposeful in your approach to partnering with an audience. The better you understand them, the better it is for you to be able to make a recommendation. When I was on the corporate side, I did a lot of assessments for smaller businesses, assessments for larger businesses. My assessments for smaller businesses are based on, I want to make sure that the risk that you're taking is something that you can afford to be patient about. Is it something where you're giving your whole savings, you're betting your whole budget? If that's the case, let's dial that back. Let's pause for a moment. Let's find a way for you to take something that is something you can afford to be more patient with, and let's start there. So I'll give an example. I worked at a company that had basically 5 to 6 salespeople for every account manager, and they were a burn and churn business. And when I say burn and churn, I mean they burned bridges and it led to churn. So when I say burning bridges, 5 to 6 salespeople, one account manager. They had very high goals as far as what the sales were going to be, but they didn't really put a large concentration on what happens after the sale. So they had salespeople that would sell on possibilities, but their possibilities were best case scenarios. So the way that things worked was they would have the salesperson would sell them on doing paid ads, running on different publications, and then they would hand it off to the account manager. I would be one of the account managers. The account manager would recap what the salesperson told them, find out the goals, make sure that everything aligned with what they were being sold. And then we would hand it off to the copywriter, and the copywriter would put together the copy. If it was a text ad, we can pretty much get them up and running pretty quickly. If it was a display ad, then we had to take a little bit more time to be able to gather the creative and make sure that we had everything set up. But overall, what I realized was this company has such a focus on being able to get that first sale. They never actually took the time to focus on what happens after that. So they would get that initial sale. They may sell something to say, listen, we can get you, some of our best sellers are being able to see 10x on the $5,000 that they invested on that campaign. Can I get you to sign off on a $5,000 budget? We'll stretch that out over the span of a month, 2 months, a quarter, whatever it was that they pitched. Their thing was to get that $5,000. What happened after they got that $5,000 was less of a consideration. Once I got into the company and I realized that's what was going on, I read the room. I realized where I could present value was on being on what happens after the sale. So when I was given the opportunity to either be a salesperson or an account manager, I'm looking at 5 salespeople, 6 salespeople per account manager. Why am I going to go and join the crowd when I can stand out as being an account manager? I knew my experience was I came up in the time where if you're an account executive, you sold it and you managed it. So any promises that you made, you had to be able to deliver on because you were the one that made the promises. Things are a little bit different now because now they've separated it because they needed to be able to have more people that could sell. When I was coming up, they only allowed people to be salespeople that knew how to sell and manage. Now that they've separated it, you've got some people that are really good at being able to sell someone on possibilities. And then you've got account managers that have to deliver on what was being sold. I chose account management because I appreciate the challenge of selling something or making something available after people know what it is that what their options are. So for me, I love being an account manager because once someone was sold, once they did their initial assessment and they went through their onboarding and then they were on, the real challenge was, okay, now you know what it is. There's no more hiddens, what ifs, or any of the rest of that. When I'm telling you something is a good idea and I'm trying to get you to invest in it, it's because I can actually deliver on it. We're not selling possibilities, or I'm not selling possibilities. I'm selling probability. I'm saying by adding this service on, what we're going to be able to do is we're going to be able to take you from here and bring you over to here. So for me, I find it fascinating that I've been using P.A.U.S.E for decades because it's been something where I evaluate the situation. Okay, when you initially came on, you were sold this. Let's pause. Let's look at it. Did you get what you thought you were getting? P.A.U.S.E becomes more of a reality check when you are dealing with someone and they're orbiting on the other side of making that first investment. When they're on the side of you trying to retain that person and hold on to them as a customer, when you want to nurture that relationship and turn them into brand champions that can help you bring in other business. On the corporate side, my goal was to not only be able to maintain that customer, but to be able to upsell them, get them to be able to add to the services that they were already giving. So on the sales side, yes, they had their sales goal, but my sales goal was to be able to match the money that the sales team was bringing in as an account manager. I wanted to be able to make sure that I was hitting my numbers and exceeding my numbers, And the way that I did that was by listening, by learning, by asking those follow-up questions, by learning everything that I needed to know before making that recommendation. I used the sales process and the onboarding to be able to gauge all the information that I needed to know. If it was something where I was dealing with a point of contact and the point of contact was someone that had their own agenda, I always like to know the why behind something. One of the things, I was having a conversation with a friend, and he was talking about working with agencies and working with different people. And I explained to him, normally when you're working with someone, one of the first things that I like to try to figure out is their why. Are you someone that is bringing a new solution because maybe you messed up in the past? Maybe you're on thin ice and you need a win. Maybe you're someone that is trying to establish yourself in a new position, and getting that win is something that would allow you to be able to stake your flag. It would allow you to be able to set a precedence. It would allow you to be able to get a certain level of credibility. Maybe you're someone that's established enough where some of those things don't matter. Knowing those things matter when it comes to making recommendations. If it was someone that has screwed up in the past and they were on thin ice, then they were relying on that solution to work more than the other options. They needed that because it was so much riding on it that you have to be as accurate as possible. I'm not selling someone on possibilities if they're on thin ice. I want to be able to sell them on something that I know I can deliver on. I know that when they bring it back to their boss or they bring it back to their office, they're able to say, here's the results that we'll be able to deliver. Here's how I can get myself up out of the hot seat and hold on to this job that I have. If it's someone that is just trying to establish themselves, then there leaves room for a little bit more risk. We can make sure that we're building something or we're establishing a product or a service that allows that person to say, this is something that may not have existed before. We're building it specifically for you. Customized solution. That's going to allow that person to be able to establish themselves, because what we're building is something that says, based on this person's understanding of what's needed, we're creating this. Or we're fine-tuning something that already exists and customizing it specifically to you. That person gets the win because what we're doing is we're showing that person's understanding of what's needed in that company, or something that maybe it wasn't needed. Maybe it was something that they wanted to be able to bring in and establish a new precedent. For someone that is more seasoned and doesn't necessarily have to worry about their job or worry about their standing in the office or the corporation or wherever they may be, my conversation is going to be different with them. Because with them, then it's really about, well, let's talk about goals. Let's talk about long-term. We don't have to worry about the risk. We can afford to be riskier. We can afford to look at further down the road. We can start to evaluate things that haven't come up yet. Here, when I'm having that kind of conversation, I can talk about preventative measures. I can talk about these things because we already have a relationship that's established. We already have trust that's established. We already have that person as a brand champion. And what I'm doing is I'm bringing something to them and saying, I've been looking at your situation. I've been looking at what's been going on in the market, and I see some things coming up that I think could actually be really good for you guys. It's a revenue stream that you guys aren't looking at right now, or maybe you are, but I can help facilitate that. I can make sure that this is something that's going to work for you. That is a different conversation. That's not a conversation that I'm going to have with someone that's on thin ice. That's not a conversation I'm going to have with someone that is trying to create credibility and their presence in the company. That's a conversation I'm going to have with someone that's more seasoned, someone that can afford to look further down the line and can afford to take that kind of risk of prognosticating and looking at something that is a preventative measure, addressing something that hasn't come up yet. Most people that are at risk or trying to establish themselves don't have time to look that far into the future. The people that are more settled into where they're at and what they're set up with, they can afford to look further down the line because they've already taken care of the immediate current situation and the immediate future. Now they can start to look further down the line. It's important to understand your market. It's important to understand who you're having a conversation with. Now let's flip that. We talked about looking at things from the customer side and then looking at the surrounding circumstances. Let's look at the circumstances in terms of what's good for the business. We talked about what would be good for the customer and their why. Now let's look at the business. Sometimes when you're trying to figure out how to be able to scale or looking for new revenue streams and opportunities, you can't just listen to the what, you have to listen to the who. Sometimes people will present feedback and give you recommendations on things that you should roll out and you should launch, but it doesn't necessarily align with your business model. In those situations, you have to know who to be able to listen to. And you have to be able to look at it from a business standpoint. Is this someone that I would get a quick win from? Is this someone that shows any kind of red flags? Is this someone that I want to be able to have a long-term relationship with? If any of those things are no, then it's something where you can listen to what their suggestions are and their feedback. But if it doesn't align with what your business model is and you can't see the quick win and then how to be able to scale it, then it's probably something that you shouldn't prioritize. As opposed to if it's someone that you know that you want to have a long-term relationship with, a long-standing thing with, then that's something where you would give that feedback more weight. You would prioritize it more based on what you can see coming from that situation as opposed to that quick win. If I know that I want to have a long-term relationship with the company, then I'm going to look at not just what we can do today or tomorrow. I'm going to look at what things would look like a month from now, a year from now, 2 years from now. I want to be able to have those kind of conversations so that people can see that I'm invested in their future and not just the sale, not just the present, not just what I can do for them now, but I'm looking at the fact that we could be potential partners for years to come. And I'm not here just to give you the win today. I want to make sure that you continue winning. Different conversation, different level of depth. And it allows you to really be able to have conversations that really matter. So pause, again, is about doing your due diligence. It's about being very intentional. It's about understanding when you're looking at it from a business perspective, is this something that I can get a quick win? Is something that's trending, but I can grab whatever wins I can grab, but I can't put a lot of marketing money and budget behind it because in 6 months and a year, this is going to be something that's probably going to fade away. If it's going to be something that fades away, then I want to be able to get those wins, but I'm not going to put the same level of budget behind it. I'm going to save that budget for something that's more of a slow burn, but is going to be more profitable. It's not going to be that bestseller. It's going to be the one that's the most profitable. So yes, in those situations, you can absolutely pursue the quick win. You can pursue the thing that's trending, but you also want to be able to think about what's next. So pause is thinking through what's next. It's thinking through the timing of what you're going to roll out. It's making sure that when you're ready to execute, all the other pieces, everything that you need to falls in place. Now, one of the next things that we're going to discuss is timing, and timed is the next framework. So we've covered first. First is putting together your foundation. It's making sure that you've done your research. You investigated and identified your target audience. You researched the audience. You built a structure around it so that you have a business model that complements not just the business idea, but your ability to be able to scale it long term. And then you've tested it out. You've gotten to the point where you know enough about it so that you can do the evaluation and pause. You can say, okay, now I know that this is something I can potentially do, but how do I turn this from a possibility into being a probability? How do I turn this into something that's a business idea and turn it into a real business opportunity? How do I turn this into something that I somewhat believe in to something that I'm 100% confident in? First is about getting yourself established so that you can answer the initial questions. Pause is being able to answer the follow-up questions. And timed is about making sure that when it's time to roll it out, you've already done your due diligence. And when you roll this out, you can hit the ground running. So each are meant to stand on their own because different people are going to have different circumstances. I don't build frameworks built on being something that's very strict and rigid. I want it to be something that can be applied in different ways and different use cases so that people can take it and customize it to themselves. So where I talked about a restaurant as an early stage business and how they use pause, I've talked about record labels and how they use pause to be able to identify when to roll out songs. I've talked about being on the corporate side and working with clients and understanding their whys so that I can understand when and how to be able to roll something out, when I can bring it back to the company and say, listen, they've been asking for this for the past 6 months. I think it's time that we actually start taking this a little more seriously, because we're coming up on the end of our contract and we have to show them that we're actually taking them serious as a client, because we want them to stay with us, versus early stage in the contract where someone just signed and all of a sudden they're coming in and they're saying, oh, it'd be great if you could do this and great if you could do that. If those aren't things that align with your business model, then you give yourself the time and the grace to see if over time it starts to better align with with the direction that you want to be able to go in. If it's not something that aligns with the direction that you want to be able to go in, it gives you time to be able to find a compromise, middle ground with that actual company, to be able to say, well, I can't do this, but I can do this. This doesn't align with our business model in the direction that we're going in, but here's the compromise that I can make for you. I can customize what it is that we have and make it so that it can do some of the things that you're asking for. That's the difference between an upsell and an add-on. An add-on is something that accommodates a specific request. It's something that it adds on to something that's already working. An upsell is, I'm going to change your world. I'm going to turn this into something that takes it beyond where you were at and takes it in a whole different direction that allows you to be able to do more of the things that you want to be able to do. I'm going to bridge the gap between where you are and your ability to be able to achieve a goal. These are things that you want to be able to think about. This is why I broke these things out into 3 different stages, but it's all part of the same path. First, you're building your foundation. You're figuring out all the questions and basic information that you want to be able to learn to turn that business idea into a business opportunity. Pause. You're turning that business opportunity and you're saying, okay, now that I know this is possible, how do I make this plausible? How do I make this probable? How do I make this something that I not only believe in, but I've got a certain level of certainty about? And then again, timed is about, okay, well, now that I've done the due diligence, now that I know that this is something that I'm going to do now, this is something that I'm going to do 6 months from now, this is something that I expect to be more meaningful in a year. It gives you a way to be more intentional and purposeful. It allows you to be able to ask better questions, gather information so that you can find out how to maximize the opportunities. That's what I got. I hope you found this helpful. If you find it helpful, insightful, like, share, and subscribe. And definitely leave some feedback. Let me know if I'm on the right path. So much of what I'm building and putting together is for small business owners and entrepreneurs. I want to bridge the gap between the business idea and their actual definition of success. When thinking through the path to 6 figures, there are so many people out there that are talking about, here's what I did to make 6 figures, or here's how I got to 7 figures. Those are things that may have been a trend. Those are things that work for that person. What I'm trying to give you is a foundation and a framework that shows you how to be able to make something your own. Shows you the basic foundational elements so that you can pull a piece from here, you can pull a piece from here, you can pull a piece from here, and put together something that fits your situation. So again, P.A.U.S.E is about evaluating not just from a business standpoint, but from the customers, and then looking at the surrounding circumstances. I want you to be empowered to be able to read the room, because when you can read the room, you'll have better conversations. When you have better conversations, you get better questions. When you get better questions, you learn how to give better answers. And the more answers that you know how to be able to answer, the more confident the audience is. And it takes them from how much is this going to cost me to how do I get in on this? It sounds like a great opportunity. With that said, I want to wish you a happy new year and stay tuned. Timed is the next framework up, and we're rolling out these episodes every other week. If you find this helpful and you want to be able to get more of a use case scenario, I invite you to check out Strategically Speaking. It's my newsletter where I highlight specific businesses and I show you how they're applying these concepts. It's going to be something where I'm also going to be rolling out Coach's Corner. And Coach's Corner is going to be where I actually walk people through it more in detail. So as much as I'm walking you through it now, I can actually give you more use cases and give you the visual as opposed to just talking about it, because I realize everybody learns in different ways. Some people can read about it. Some people can hear about it. Some people actually need to be able to see it. So thank you again for your time, and we'll see you next time. Thank you for tuning in to the Strategic Thinkers podcast. Remember, when you can make the inconvenient convenient, people are willing to pay you for the experience. The better the experience, the more they'll not only pay you, but help others pay you. Serving as brand champions. My name is Sean Atkinson, and I'm wishing you well on your journey to your definition of success. If you find this podcast interesting, helpful, worth the listen, like, share, and subscribe. Leave a positive review so people know to check it out, and I'll see you next time.